Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor. With me, as always, is Phil.
Oh.
Low, Phil. Low to you indeed. UFC 303. Back on the docket today. An event which went down despite some tribulations, shall we say. It officially happened. Alex Pereira, Jiri Prochazka stepped in for the main event that was supposed to be Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Although whether it was really supposed to be that in a cosmic sense, I suppose that's for you to decide. The co-main event, which we were quite excited about, Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez, ended up being scrapped. First, the weight class was changed because Brian Ortega was sick and wasn't going to make weight. And then they scrapped it day of the event, prompting, I hope, a well-rewarded Dan Ige to step in on hours' notice to fight Diego Lopez. So once again, the fighter's doing so much more than the promotion deserves to save these cards, and I really hope they are getting well compensated for that. And then otherwise, most of the other fights that were already on here, some of them already changed by various pullouts and injuries and whatnot. Most of them on this main card, at least, kind of sucked. So it was really a blessing that we had Pereira, Prochazka, and to a lesser extent, but certainly by the time he warmed up into the fight, Ige versus Lopez as well at the end of this card. Because without them, I think this would have been one very long, very wet fart to end UFC 303.
Yep, you are not kidding. It is cool to see that Alex Pereira has become like a legitimate star.
He's a star, yeah, for sure.
And yeah, this was really his moment where that has become very, very apparent. Is that he was one of the few people who was able to, both willing and able to step into a Conor McGregor vacated main card spot, go out there at the end of a card which had mostly sucked, and then leave people happy.
Yeah.
And put like a highlight in the books.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, he's it now. Like, he's one of the UFC's like major stars at this point. And it's cool. But yes, other than that, he had to save the card because it really needed saving by that point.
It really did. Yeah, I mean, just to sum it up for you, I mean, look, the early prelims were not good. The televised prelims were pretty solid. Those were all, I mean, most of them were very quick finishes, and the one that wasn't was a fun back and forth fight. But then by the main card again, yeah, the fights that we're mostly going to be talking about are ones we talked about last week. A highlight of the main card, the first fight of the main card, Ian Machado Gary versus Michael Page. What did we say about that one, Phil?
That it was going to be bad.
I think we said it was going to stink. And boy, did it. I love that this is the only kind of prediction I really feel I consistently nail, is when I just get the strong impression a fight is going to suck to watch. We're usually right about that.
There was a prop bet on suck at you.
Honestly. Yeah. If I could attach some sort of device to myself that judges when I fall asleep and use that as evidence to cash in my bet. Roman Dolidze, Anthony Smith, a fight which somehow emerged from what was originally Jamal Hill versus, well, I was going to say Carlos Ulberg, but before that it was Khalil Roundtree. Somehow we ended up with Dolidze Smith, another fight that we had very little interest in, and once again, our lack of faith was rewarded by a dog shit fight, though Joe Rogan did not seem to notice that one was bad. Macy Chase and Mayra Bueno Silva was actually pretty fun while it lasted. It ended in horrible gore, however. And then, yeah, the co-main event wasn't really that great until it suddenly kicked off in the third. And then the main event without those, I think this would have been a largely very tedious main card experience. So that's pretty much what we're going to talk about. Maybe throw in a couple of other little gems here and there, but let's waste no more time and talk about that main event featuring new made star Alex Pereira defending his light heavyweight title against Jiri Prochazka in a rematch that, well, we can say more so than ever now that we've seen it, did not really need to happen. Because Jiri Prochazka, still incapable of learning.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about, watching this fight, is that Jiri is one of those guys that needs to learn either a lot or absolutely nothing. Because learning small things is potentially very, very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've spoken to this kind of dynamic before, but because it felt like he'd learned something small and or, potentially big, in between the Pereira fight, their first fight, and this fight, which is, I can be killed. He hadn't learned anything, technical or any, solutions to what Pereira could do. I think he had simply learned that he could be killed, and that more than that this person could be the one who could do it.
Yep.
I think we had a lot more of, he looked quite tentative, and just his body language in terms of sort of nodding when he'd receiving shots. And, At one point he smiled and did the "you got me" kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, Jiri Prochazka should not be thinking like this.
No, he's having a bad time.
This man has one thing which is keeping him alive in fights. It is a laser-like intensity and belief that he is the most badass, dangerous man in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, seeing Jiri, I fully agree with that. Seeing Jiri Prochazka stripped of his stoicism is kind of alarming. Seeing him acknowledge when he's being hit, seeing him, that is in fact the main thing I noticed. I was in there looking for technical details. The main thing I noticed about the knockout is that Alex Pereira comes out after, dropping Prochazka and hurting him, even though it was just a weird, long, didn't look like a particularly powerful punch. He hurt him. He comes out in round 2, and Prochazka is immediately, not pressing. He's sort of trying to maintain distance. He's there. He's bouncing. And I think Pereira just looks at his face and says, oh, he's done. He's afraid.
Mm-hmm.
That is my technical analysis of that moment. Pereira saw that Jiri Prochazka was shook and just decided to blast him with something he hadn't shown him yet. And it worked. He just had a guy who was there waiting so he could do something not to get hit by whatever it was he was worried about. And Pereira saw it. And you can see it in the slow motion replays. It is not a confident look on Jiri Prochazka's face. It is a man waiting to die and hoping it doesn't happen. And that is what Pereira sensed that enabled him to put Prochazka away. I really wanted to see some technical pattern, where's the foundation laid for this incredible switch kick that Pereira lands. And I just don't think there's much there. I think he just feels it. Because Prochazka's a vibes fighter and the vibes were off. They were broken.
Yeah. And there's a moment 2 minutes to go before the end of round 1 where they just hand fight a bit, and then Jiri sort of laughs and says something to Pereira.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you are toast, man.
Yeah.
You cannot be here thinking you are anything other than a samurai who is going to die.
Yeah. Trying to communicate with Alex Pereira. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
That's not going to save you.
Yeah. So, it really looked like these two just came in with, both of them came in knowing basically who was better.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Pereira, on the other hand, like, wasn't as, didn't pressure as much as we liked, I think. But then again, he sort of didn't need to, because again, like, Jiri was quite passive.
Yeah, I thought he had a pretty balanced...
Worked his jab.
Yeah, a lot. Mm-hmm. I love to see that. He used it a ton. He threw it to the chest, too. Frequently caught Jiri just kind of blind ducking because he kept targeting the jab at his upper chest. Yeah, he used it a ton. I thought this was a pretty nice, balanced, kind of directional performance from Pereira. It was just kind of a boxing. You know, like, if I need to move back, I'll move and I'll change angle. He used his jab to stop Prochazka from building on him, from like adding any kind of significant pressure. And then he would use the same threat of that jab to then turn that evasive movement back into a little bit of his own pressure. Okay, now I've outmaneuvered you. Now I'm going to move in. It was just like a nice, fencing kind of performance. Not particularly concerned with being evasive or super fixated on pressuring. But, you know what this weirdly reminded me of from Pereira? It was like one of the best John Jones striking performances. Like he's tall, upright, he's maintaining the distance, largely picking single strikes, and really focusing on the attrition.
Yeah.
Except that he just has absolutely devastating power. And he does not have John Jones's chin. But that is really what it reminded me of, was like Jones versus, I don't know, Jones Cormier too. Jones Rashad. I'm trying to think of these just like really sort of
Rampage, probably.
Yeah, just steady, consistent pace, using the reach, attacking whatever target's available, and just very consistently chipping the other person apart from a safe distance.
He did look just very dialed in on his counter as well.
Yeah.
Like, very, very quickly dialing in on, left hook counters to the jab and so on.
Yep.
Which might necessarily be a bit on the risky side, but you clearly just saw, again, like, it looked like he simply knew who was better. And he knew what to expect this time. And he knew that he was going to win.
Yeah. He was.
Not only was he like picking up on like attritional damage and pulling away over the course of the fight, over the course of the first round, he capped it off with knocking him down. Jiri got a body lock takedown body lock attempt by the cage and got absolutely nothing for it apart from being punched in the face a few times. Yeah, it was not a good look for Jiri Prochazka.
No, I mean, I hate to say that, like, the only thing available to him would have been to just come in, like, somehow fearless. Because, like, there's just so many technical things you would like to improve that it seems almost insurmountable. The fact that...
As I said, he either needs to learn a lot...
Yeah.
Or he needs to learn nothing.
He needs to unlearn everything and just...
a huge gulf of opportunity costs, essentially.
Yeah.
And learning that he was mortal was probably the worst thing he could have learned.
I mean, honestly, though, like, the fact that you can come into this fight, it is now the third fight in a row, one of which was against this same dude, where you have just been ravaged by low kicks. And to come into this fight with no new idea of how to handle those. Nothing. Like, I don't know how to explain the way that a guy like, I mean, unfortunately, I think it's very common the way that a guy like Jiri Prochazka thinks in MMA. I was picking up on his like pre-fight comments, in like the promo package. And he's talking, like so many fighters, everything is just doing stuff more. Like that's the key, right? It's like fighters all have grind set. And in Jiri Prochazka's mind, that last fight, he's like, well, I just need to train harder. I need to be more focused. I need to be, you know what I mean? Like at no point is he saying, I had a massive technical flaw. I didn't know how to defend this thing he used against me, so I learned to do that. He didn't mention learning anything. He just determined he was going to do things harder. And then it's like the moment the fight started, he was like, oh, that's not going to work. And then he was lost. He was just lost psychologically. Because he didn't come in with anything new.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just in part that he, to do that is in some ways, like I said, to learn anything is to sort of remove some of the primal nature of Jiri Prochazka to learn that low kicks, defending low kicks is a good idea, is to learn that, is to be tacitly conceding that things can hurt you.
That's right. It's to accept the mortality. He went in there full of denial.
Yeah, I mean, but this is the worst of both worlds, right? Where
yeah.
He clearly tried not to accept any of the bad things that were going to happen to him. And, was just like, yes, all I have to do is do this harder and have more, Bushido spirit. But clearly some internal part of him had learned this is a very, very scary man.
Yeah. What we saw was a man who went in there with the aware of the sensing the black cloud of mortality hanging over his head, but incapable of acknowledging it. Because if he'd been capable of acknowledging it, he would have fixed something. Anything. Yep. All of which is to summarize, to say that this was essentially a notably better, more consistent showing from Alex Pereira, and a much, much worse one from Jiri Prochazka.
Yeah, this was the Cheeto O'Malley.
Absolutely, yes.
Title fights.
Yeah. Very much so. Oh my god, we didn't even mention, by the way, the stare down that happened for this fight. One of the corniest things I have ever seen on live TV. But I really liked it. I was laughing the entire time, but it was pretty awesome too. It was a nice, I feel like we don't get to see that kind of stuff. You get spontaneous moments in big UFC shows. You got the Lawler McDonald stare down after round 3 or whatever it was. You get those moments, but this felt like an orchestrated, like it was worked out ahead of time. You guys are going to do this incredibly epic stare down, not blinking.
I think one of them just started it, and the other one was like, well, that's what we're doing.
They went on for 5 minutes, Phil.
Yeah, what else are they gonna...
They spent the duration of an entire round battling each other with eye contact. It was so ridiculous.
Their, guardian spirits were behind them at that moment, and then, lunged at each other and were clashing in the middle of the cage.
Yeah.
Where no one could see them. Apart from, obviously, Jiri and Alex.
Yeah.
I mean, they're two super intense, very weird dudes.
Yes.
It felt very fitting.
Yeah, it was like two, I don't know, just strange dogs encountering each other in an abandoned alley and just staring each other down for minutes on end. In so many ways, though, I felt like a fight that really cemented Alex Pereira as a superstar of MMA, like a really big main attraction. I think he very much showcased that he is still capable of picking things up and if not like revolutionizing his game, then adapting and focusing more on certain techniques. Again, I thought this was a very strong, just a solid showing from Alex Pereira. He didn't let Prochazka build too much pressure on him. He was ready with quick and precise responses, not just trying to take his head off when Prochazka did press him, but frequently just running him into that jab. or that weird long counter left hook he dropped him with at the end of round 1. And then, they would have like an exchange. Prochazka would be super tense and he would miss, and Pereira would be throwing super hard and he might miss in return, and then they'd reset and Pereira would just immediately kick him in the calf or the body. She's like, okay, so we have the super scary exchanges where to get to them you have to run into my jab, and then you're certainly not hitting me and I might be hitting you in return, and then the moment you like need a break from that, I'm just going to start wrecking every part of your body I can find. That's a one-size-fits-all approach, I feel, for Alex Pereira against a lot of light heavyweights. It just happened to work incredibly well here against Prochazka.
Yep.
All right. Well, I don't think there's much more to say. Yeah. What do you got?
Yeah, he's just been someone who's improved from fight to fight. I mean, these guys, obviously he's much older than Jiri. I think they've actually been combat sports pros for about the same amount of time. But Alex is, he's just someone who's clearly improving from fight to fight, even at the age of 36.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that makes him both extremely scary for his opponents and, has sort of brought him to this kind of position as, like, the UFC's newest and, I don't know, in some ways, most surprising star. I certainly didn't expect this of him when he came to the UFC. I was like, there is an outside chance he could get there to a Adesanya title shot and maybe win it, but I didn't really think it would go much further than that.
Yeah, now look at him.
Yeah. I mean, admittedly, it is all somewhat favorable matchmaking.
Of course. But it's also like, now he's light heavyweight champ. It's going to be hard to find unfavorable matchmaking. It's not the best division, is it?
It is simply Magomed Ankalaev, and I think perhaps the only person who can both wrestle and will genuinely try and do it a lot. I'm going to say this because who I feel could actually beat the light heavyweight champion, Nikita Krylov.
Nicky Thrills. I knew you were going to say it.
He's possibly the only other person.
Yeah, he will at least, he could do his little light heavyweight Fluffy Hernandez impression and maybe make something happen with that.
Yeah, if he just goes for takedowns over and over again, maybe it'll just work. But who knows? But, as I said, maybe that is even in itself an open question, because Pereira is just one of those guys that just keeps getting better and better. And he could go to heavyweight now, and he could fight Tom Aspinall or something like, or John Jones, and he might beat them.
Yeah.
And certainly modern John Jones, there's a strong chance that John Jones would try and do the Cyril Gane thing, and then it simply wouldn't work because Alex Pereira is a more, as much as he's not a great grappler, that he's just a more diligent fighter than that. So the world is kind of his oyster at the moment, and
at the very least, he's
all credit to him.
At the very least, he's very calm when he's being out grappled, which is something Cyril Gane cannot claim. At least he can Derek Lewis his way to the next round and still be fresh.
Yep.
It's something. Yeah, did you see, by the way, that Ankalaev, the preliminary betting odds dropped? He's like a huge favorite over Pereira.
Have these people seen how...
They're just like, well, he's going to wrestle him.
Ankalaev approach his fight.
They just look at it. They're like, well, he's going to wrestle him. He's so good at grappling.
Well, and you saw Ankalaev talking about the fight, right?
No,
what
did he
Pereira's
say?
Chin is gone.
Oh my God. I'm going to knock this motherfucker out. Yes, do it. Make that fight. I'm sorry, forget the heavyweight run. I need to see Pereira just cleaning out the dog shit at light heavyweight. Make the Ankalaev fight immediately. His chin is gone. That's right, Magomed. You get him, buddy. All right. Okay, there I think we should take our break, so that we can come back and talk about the co-main event, Diego Lopez, Dan Ige, and that may just bleed right into a discussion of the whole rest of this main card and whatever else we find interesting enough to talk about. I can't, honestly, having already set up Lopez Ige, you may come back from this break and we're just talking about Gary Page, because I really want to talk about that. So maybe we'll jump the gun. One way or the other, we'll get there after this on Heavy Hands.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Ian fucking Gary. I couldn't resist. All right. Forget the co-main event. It wasn't the one we wanted anyway. It's fine. We're going to talk about it. But Ian Machado, goddamn Gary. He had his fight with Michael Venom Page. And, if you could, Phil, explain to our listeners in as few words as possible, actually more of a challenge, in as many words as possible, what was Ian Gary's game plan for this fight?
Well, I believe afterwards he said, Michael Page's plan is to make you try and low kick him and then counter them.
No, he didn't. Did he actually say that?
Did. Yeah.
Oh my!
He said
God.
He said Michael Page had a really smart game plan. He wants you to throw low kicks and then so he could counter you.
You could tell it was his game plan
that.
because of all the low kicks I didn't throw. That's how you know it was good. That is such ass backwards logic.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Page had a good game plan because I was very nervous.
That's why I didn't do anything. I didn't test that game plan existed. But, that's what I knew he wanted to do. I knew he wanted to counter the thing that he visibly is very weak to.
Bro, that is the definition of brain thinking.
Yes.
You come into the fight.
It's true galaxy brain stuff here.
Jesus Christ. Obviously I should low kick this guy, but he knows that. So actually I'll counter him by not doing that. That is galaxy brain. Seriously.
Yep.
That is, you have fooled yourself into thinking you're a genius if you're thinking that way. And it is in fact the thought process of an idiot.
What if I give him a terrible, slow-paced stinker, which I have to win on essentially 2 somewhat fortunate moments of top control? That'll be the last thing he's expecting.
Yeah. Well, Michael Page has...
Even though he's had fights exactly like that. You reckon Ian Gary must have been watching that Paul Daly fight. Just sitting there thinking, yeah, this is it. This is it. Just don't do any damage. And get some top position.
This Paul Daly's a smart fella.
Maybe something there will happen.
I mean, I think that's the core idea of all great game plans. Maybe something will happen.
Yeah.
It's also a great reason not to do anything.
Yeah, when you look at that Paul Daly fight, you think, as any person would,
yeah,
here is someone who is maximizing his skills and gifts.
Yeah, this is the guy.
Strategic genius Paul Daly is doing it again.
Yeah, Paul Daly threading the needle
that I must emulate.
Threading the needle of strategy once again. Yeah, this was I started to think last week that the listeners of the show have gotten to, I hope, enjoy the process of me, really, like, defending Ian Gary. Because people just instantly didn't like him. And I'm like, I get that, but he's clearly very good. And then as I find out all the ways in which he's not actually very good, you've gotten to, experience the journey of me starting to hate Ian Gary. And because of that, because of the vitriol, last week I started to think after the fact, like, I was too harsh on Ian Gary based on that one fight, just that Jeff Neal fight. Like, I thought he was pretty solid before that against Neil Magny. And am I really overstating this? Like, is that enough to guess that either there is like some downward trend in his like preparation, or that just against better, faster opponents, he's going to come up with more of these like harebrained safety first game plans that almost lose? It's not enough to go on, surely. And I got to thank Mr. Gary for this performance, because it made me feel as if I was very much seeing things clearly. This was a historic bed shitting from Ian Gary, even though he won. This was like I'm close to writing you off as any kind of future contender kind of performance.
Yeah, I genuinely didn't want him to win watching this fight.
Oh no, I thought he deserved to lose it for sure.
Yeah. If they'd chosen to essentially rob him, I mean, maybe not even robbing him, he didn't really land anything significant in any of the rounds.
No.
Then I would have been perfectly happy with it, because, that was absolutely deserved for this absolutely shocking stinker of a fight. And the one thing we've learned is that, in fact, that the hive mind is right. When we come out with contrarian takes, we should probably just humbly accept that we're wrong and stupid, because it always gets thrown back in our face. Israel Adesanya came out and people were like, he's just like Anderson Silva. And we're like, no, actually, he's not. He's a lot more aggressive and focused than Anderson Silva. And then after a while, we were like, oh no, he isn't doing anything. He's not doing anything. He is also entirely counter-focused like Anderson became. In some ways, he's even worse.
Yeah.
And, people were like, Nasrat Haqparast is just like Kelvin Gastelum. We were like, actually, but no, he is exactly.
Did I push back on that one? I'm not sure I pushed back on that one.
We did, yeah. I think we did. We were like, he's partially because we simply, like, he was earlier on in the prospect cycle.
Yeah.
And we were expecting bigger things from him.
Yeah.
But what was the other one? Like, Sean Strickland. Everyone was like, Sean Strickland sucks. Actually, I mean, you specifically, no, he's like really interesting as a janky technician.
I mean, I kind of knew he sucked, just in a way I liked.
Yeah.
Just in a way I enjoyed,
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, what we're learning is that the hive mind is just correct.
Well,
it's the wisdom of crowds. It's the ability of, people to be able to, on average, guess the number of, marbles that are in a jar or whatever it is. They're just correct. If they say that people suck, they're probably right.
I think the hive mind now, I mean, if we should be agreeing with it, if that's your theory going forward, then the hive mind now thinks that Sean Strickland's actually a really cool guy with some interesting ideas.
That is not the hive mind that we listen to.
I don't know. There's a lot of that. I'm not sure I'm ready to subscribe either. I might just have to keep being a contrarian. With Ian Gary, I mean, what was the hive mind saying then? He's annoying? I don't think anyone was saying he sucked I don't think anybody realized he sucked this much as a fighter.
Yeah.
I'm still not entirely sure this is permanent. Like, there's a strong indication that there is something against that Jeff Neal and Michael Page are just by far his fastest, most dangerous opponents at range.
I mean, he always wanted to be the new Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
So maybe this is just what happens when, like Conor McGregor, he fights people who are like his size and have some like movement or skill at range.
I mean, even then, Conor McGregor.
Yeah, I guess he still beat like Max Holloway.
Yeah, he knocked out Jose Aldo. I mean, he had the size.
Yeah, but he's much bigger.
He had the size, but the speed and everything. I mean, at this point, Jeff Neal
they finished their careers like they're going to finish their careers like 4 weight classes apart.
Yeah, but I mean, Jeff Neal is smaller than Ian Gary.
Yeah.
That was no Conor McGregor performance where he's like, I know this guy's faster, but he's a dwarf, so I'm just going to crush him. No, like Gary does not have that confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really stood out about this performance. This was an incredibly unconfident performance from Ian Gary, which in typical Ian Gary fashion, he had to like throw his hands up and start swagging around and talking about how great it was afterwards. You know, like the facade, because it's very clear this was a performance characterized by timidity, because Ian Gary did almost nothing. He did almost nothing. I mean, I don't think he landed a single significant strike on the feet. I'm not joking. I don't think he landed a single strike on the feet of any significance.
I've been running in the background whilst we've been talking. Like, I've just been scrolling back and forth through it. I think you are correct.
I mean, I'm curious what the stats say.
It's going to be a whole bunch of like rabbit punches on the ground, right? That they're scoring.
Yeah, a lot of those aren't considered significant. Yeah, Fight Stats says it attributes 21 significant strikes. Sorry, 19 to Ian Gary, 21 to Michael Page. I do not. That's not right.
No, I don't believe it.
At distance. Okay, strikes landed at distance 9. I don't even think that's right. I don't know I don't know what you're calling a strike if you're saying he landed 9 significant strikes at range. Are we talking about like a half-hearted kick that gets blocked? Does that count? Because like everything was really obvious from very far away, mostly kicks because he was too nervous to get close. No punches at all that I can recall. His game plan appeared to be do nothing, wait for Michael Page to commit, and then tie him up. And sometimes that resulted in a takedown. Once, in fact. Other times it resulted in Ian Gary getting bowled over and having to like play guard. Other times it just resulted in like protracted clinch exchanges against the fence where nothing happened. He didn't have I knew he was going to wrestle. I mean, I did say that much last week.
Yeah.
It's like, I have a feeling that's the game planner's tack in this kind of matchup. But he didn't even have like a real game plan built around what he was going to do with his wrestling. And everything was entirely up to Michael Page for any of Ian Gary's success to happen. Michael Page had to willingly make the right kind of mistake, or else Ian Gary would have gotten nothing done in this fight. That, I cannot think of a worse game plan than one which is entirely dependent on waiting for your opponent to do something wrong and offering...
Waiting for your opponent, Michael Venom Page.
Yeah.
To do something wrong. You know, if this was Iwan Kutalaba, fine.
Yeah, just go be patient, chill, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like, if MVP had been less aggressive...
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm saying this. He would have won this fight, like, in some ways, very literally, running away. He would have easily won this.
He could
have just landed, like, 3 strikes around, and then done nothing else.
The strikes he did land were clearly so much better than any of the nothing Ian Gary was landing. Even his jabs were landing with authority. He should have... Honestly, this is a thing that has happened to Michael Page before. He should have just said, I'm not going to kick. Maybe a high kick, you know. I'll kick at his head. I'm not going to kick his body or his legs because the first takedown was a result of a caught kick.
Yep.
This is something that Michael Page has done in fights before, and then kind of, as the fight went on, he kind of figured out, okay, no more obvious kicks. He went for a couple like oblique kicks, things that are hard to intercept and catch. And then after that, just no overhand rights, no big knockout punches, just long single straight punches and reset. That would have won him the fight 100%, because Ian Gary offered nothing proactive. Nothing. I mean, Stephen Thompson would have done better than this. Stephen Thompson would have been more aggressive on the feet than Ian Gary. By far.
I mean, Mod actually quite aggressive a lot of the time. Maybe he wouldn't have been so much against MVP. But I think there is actually an uptick in his... there has been an uptick in his aggression in his later career. He simply, he just can't wrestle anymore.
He would have been more aggressive than this. He would have, he would have landed some kicks. Ian Gary threw his...
so...
Go on. I'm just
going to the end of round one. I don't think Gary's landed a significant strike. He's thrown. But yeah, he just hasn't landed a meaningful strike.
I'm just going to straight up say the number is wrong. I disagree with the significant strike statistic. I just disagree. I don't know how they're calculating significant strikes. There's no way he landed 19 strikes that fit any definition of significant in this fight. Not even close.
No.
He threw his first low kick of the fight in round 3.
Boy. Yeah, it simply is that. MVP, he won this because MVP was too reckless.
Yeah. He was simply too aggressive for his own good.
Yeah. His level of intensity and aggression was too high. And you're like, oh, is it an uncharacteristically aggressive Michael Venom Page fight then? No, it was not.
If anything, a pretty moderately aggressive Michael Venom Page.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I just can't say enough bad things about this performance from Ian Gary. Like, what does it say about him? I mean, I think it's just hard not to think that since getting ousted from Team Evil, that has had an effect. It's hard for me not to go back to that theory. But then again, I don't know. Like, the team he's at, what is it? It's Chutebox, Diego Lima, which is a team with all the Chucky Olives impersonators, all these little Brazilian dudes with their blonde hair. All of those guys are fighting like Charles Oliveira. What is Ian Gary doing? What Zane said to me is that Gary, his understanding was that Gary pretty much has his own guys. And he just wants to come to a gym to work with people, but not really be part of the team. Which fine, I get that. How much is he cloistered that he is at that gym and these are the performances being produced? Is it just that all these little guys he's fighting are super aggressive and he is is that teaching him the wrong lessons? That he should be like the big tall guy who just lets them exhaust themselves? Is that what he's learning? I don't know. What explains this? The Jeff Neal fight and this are now part of such a clear pattern.
Yeah. I mean, I as I said last time, I think it is just him, because I think people have said this about politicians, right? Is that the things that people love about them end up being the things that people hate about them, and he's sort of speed running that perception with regards to his approach to fights.
Yeah,
because the things that people loved about him was his ability, or we loved about him, I guess, was his ability to change things from fight to fight. Have a back foot performance against this guy and a front foot performance against this guy, and so on. And we're simply realizing that he does not have the depth of skill to be able to run some of the game plans that he clearly wants to. And
also that he can't, he seemingly really struggles to adjust them.
Yeah.
On the fly. He might be one of these guys who is chained to a game plan. Yeah, also what?
The more I'm watching this fight, the more he just didn't win it, did he?
I don't think he deserved to win it. He didn't do shit.
Right?
He didn't do shit. He got top position and did nothing with it twice.
Yeah. He loses the first round, very, very clearly.
Yeah.
And then the second round, he just doesn't do anything with his grappling, and he still gets hit by a bunch of clean strikes.
Yep. And then round 3, he actually ends up on bottom for a period. He definitely still loses the striking. Granted, he does land his one low kick of the fight.
Or maybe I'm confusing rounds 2 and 3 here. I forgot where I was, but yeah, there's at least 2 rounds in this fight that he just definitely clearly loses on my card.
I mean, certainly pretty much everyone thought he won round 3 because he got more top control. I just don't think it's very clear because he just didn't do anything with it. He just didn't do, and he did nothing on the feet. He literally did nothing on the feet. It's not an exaggeration. Nothing. The stats are wrong. He did not land this many strikes. He just stood there, waiting for Michael Page to go first.
Yeah. I think it is that he thinks that he's like a fight genius, and he's quickly coming up against the limits of that. And but he doesn't have someone to actually train him and tell him when things are stupid ideas.
That must be it.
And that he's just winging it. And he was and this time he was I'm gonna out grapple this guy, and I don't even know if he had a second plan. He was gonna out grapple him and then lure him into overcommitting and counter strike him. He just looked lost as soon as the striking exchanges started.
I really don't think there was that much depth at all to the strategy. The thing you said, which I missed, that he said after the fight, it really sums up, I think, the self-defeating thought process that he has fallen into. I assume the guy's game plan is to punish me for doing the obvious things that seem like they'll work, and so I'm not going to do those things, thereby not even proving that he was prepared to counter them. It's so ass backwards. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Just that Ian Gary he's dead to me. such a bad performance, and the one against Jeff Neal was not good either. That's 2 in a row, buddy. 2 in a row against the best athletes you've ever faced, and this is what you're doing. I'm out.
Yeah. I think the terrible thing is that he's winning these fights. I think it just can't believe in him until honestly, it seems like he just needs a humiliating loss at this point.
Well, now he's called out Shavkat Rakhmonov.
Cool.
So do it. I think you're running right up to the limit of which of these guys is simply so crazy that I cannot neutralize them by doing nothing.
Yep.
I think you're running right up to that limit already, Mr. Gary. So do it. Make that fight, and maybe then he'll have to recalibrate, and he'll start to look like the guy who seemed to have so much potential not that long ago. But these are 2 damning fights in a row.
There needs to be a violent recalibration.
Seriously. Go apologize to Henry Hooft,
Yeah.
Hey, listen, mate, I'm sorry I was intensely obnoxious.
And Henry will just be prove to me that you're serious. Punch your girlfriend in the face. Prove to me that you're worthy of joining Team Evil.
Abandon your child, and then perhaps we will talk. Yeah, I don't know, man. It just seems like the Ian Gary train is fully off the rails with this performance. Very, very, very bad.
We thought it would be bad, but I've got to be honest. In no way did I think it would be this bad.
No, honestly, somehow, even though it was exactly the kind of bad we were sort of describing, I was still like thinking, I'm going to be impressed with something Ian Gary does. Nothing. Not a thing. So that's that. Let's take one more break. When we come back, the rest of the card after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, the co-main event, which ultimately ended up being a catchweight bout, contested at 165 pounds. Diego Lopez, who was expected to face Brian Ortega, had to deal with a truly last-minute opponent change, as Ortega first thought he was going to miss weight and then was not medically cleared to fight. I think like 4 hours at most before this bout actually was to start. Dan Ige stepped up and said he was down to fight Diego Lopez. He was in shape, and massive credit to Dan Ige for that. I think what we saw in this fight, on the one hand, was a fighter who just simply was not going against the opponent they expected. And on the other side, a fighter who, much like Nate Diaz in his super short notice fill-in against Conor McGregor, really needed some time to get warmed up and shake off the rust, which I think is just a thing that happens when you're not actually in camp and fully locked in and prepared for your opponent. You know, we saw Danny.
He was in camp, I believe, but he just, he wasn't in, in terms of that sort of acceleration that people had towards the actual, he'd only just sort of started that. I think he was they were a month out before when he was actually expected to be fighting.
Yeah,
the reason why this
clearly hadn't really
165 pounds, which is also a very funny thing to think about, like modern featherweight.
Right. Yeah, it's fully 20 pounds over the division both of these guys compete in professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that does speak to just how early in the camp it was. Ige basically had not started his weight cut yet. And I'm glad they didn't try to make him cut a bunch of weight, He saved the card. He did his part to save the card, just as Alex Pereira and Jiri Prochazka did in the main event. And Diego Lopez too. I mean, it's not easy to have your opponent change the day of the fight either. But yeah, what I saw from Ige was very much somebody who just wasn't in fighting form yet. Somebody who knows how to fight, but needed to settle into this fight, and gain his confidence and his feel. And I think by round 3, you saw that. Again, it really reminded me of Diaz McGregor 1, where I think Nate actually said that himself. He was like, yeah, I was not in camp, so I just knew I was going to have to take my time and settle in. And once it happened, just as it did then, Dan Ige just like fully took over. Diego Lopez was gassing too, which didn't help. But up to that point, it was kind of not great, really. Sort of following the trend set by two of the other fights on this main card. It was just kind of a very tepid, slow fight where Dan Ige looked flummoxed really by the size of Diego Lopez.
Yeah.
Is that what you saw as well?
Yeah, I mean, Dan Ige is definitely, increasingly as his career goes on, like, most comfortable as a counterpuncher. I mean, I'm more and more I kind of think of him as being like the Eddie Alvarez of his division.
Yeah.
He's got a few tricks to close range, but what he really wants is for you to come in so he can, like, He can sit down on a counterpunch. He's a very, he's a strong defensive wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly it's his scrambling and wrestling. But yeah, primarily his functional flaw is always going to be that he's a short guy that wants to counterpunch.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so this fight, he had to kind of burst his way into range, and Lopez just threw like a million punches and kicks and knees at him until he went out of the pocket. And yeah, it certainly served to keep Lopez winning the fight,
Mm-hmm.
but as mentioned, it also kind of gassed him out.
Yeah, the pace wasn't even that torrid, was it, really?
I mean, he was trying to punch Ige like as hard as he could, like as fast as he could every time they got into a pocket exchange.
Yeah.
Through.
I mean, I suppose what I'm saying is I think it very much, even in this fight that he won, and I'm kind of glad he did, Ige gets a...
Oh, yeah.
Lopez is just a fighter with momentum. He was supposed to be lined up for a big fight that he had a chance of winning, and it would have sucked to see him robbed of that momentum by, even though it would have been great to see Dan Ige as the second guy in as many weeks come in just no notice whatsoever and crush. But I think it was the best outcome that Lopez won. At the same time, I think that the gassing speaks to a serious just limitation in his style. Yeah. Not one we weren't aware of, but it sort of was an undercurrent in this fight. This is pretty much a neutralizing performance where you're staying away and scaring the guy out of the pocket with an occasional combo. And still, you are such an essentially reckless all-out fighter that you are exhausting yourself doing that.
Yeah. I mean, this is why, in some ways, I said I thought he was such a cripplingly, this was a terrible matchup for him against Brian Ortega.
Yeah, he was just going to lose.
Ortega is much more comfortable at range, much happier to just, run and just functionally just a lot bigger than Ige.
Yep.
And just would have been much happier to just jab Lopez up and not be forced to cover space and get into those kind of exchanges.
Right.
And yes, Ortega also would have been, like Ige, presumably still functionally immortal and ungrappleable as well. But yeah, I think you're right. It is the best possible outcome that we could have gotten in many ways, because really both guys are winners. Lopez very clearly won the fight. It's 2 rounds to 1, no real arguments. But Ige gets credit for being super gritty and for coming in and for looking like he was turning it around. Everyone is going to be excited to see both of these guys again.
Yeah.
But yes, I think Lopez's flaws are still quite apparent.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to get exploited by the next top fighter that he goes up against that isn't, immensely flawed himself.
I mean,
who can he beat? Essentially,
I don't think it's certain that he would have beaten Dan Ige with a full camp. I mean, looking at this performance.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this is more or less the limit for Diego Lopez, right around this level.
He might be able to beat, slightly fragile grapplers. He might be able to beat, Bryce Mitchell or Aljamain Sterling.
Sure. Aljamain, I think I'd be surprised to see him out-grapple Aljamain.
But, I mean, I'm not saying he would. I would pick him over them, but
yeah,
I think he could potentially beat those guys. But yeah, and maybe, Calvin Cates is looking kind of shocked.
True, yeah.
Maybe he could just, especially if it's a 3-rounder, maybe he could just duplicate this fight with Dan Ige. Cater starts slow, just drops a couple rounds, and then beats him up in the last frame.
The obvious trade-off there being
that
the big trade-off there being that, unlike Dan Ige, Cater is neither small nor uncomfortable taking the lead.
Yeah.
I think that was really the main thing. Again, maybe Ige could have prepared around that, although it is even in fights where he is prepared for that, he struggles with it. But that to me was why he just couldn't get anything going against Lopez. He just was uncomfortable having to close the distance and take the initiative that aggressively. And so he was just winging big shots from way too far away. He wasn't setting things up. He wasn't throwing straight and clean. He just looked unsure of his range against a bigger, taller opponent. I don't think Calvin Kattar has that issue. I don't know. Yeah.
I think there's a bunch of people that he just has no chance against, basically. Or, no chance outside of a freak finish. There's, your Holloways, your Ortegas, and your so on. There's a bunch of people that he will have. He could have cool, fun fights where if something crazy might happen.
Yes.
Josh Emmett, I think Yair Rodriguez is probably who I would try and book him against. It's guaranteed fireworks.
Yeah.
A big sloppy mess. And, but yeah, there's also just I think I would expect him to just get smoked from distance because he doesn't look like he has any range game whatsoever that isn't waiting for the opponent to blitz in and then, just driving them out of the pocket with lots and lots of punches.
Just unloading, yeah. Yeah, so, it was what it was. What else on this main card caught your attention? We sort of already alluded to Dolidze versus Smith being a nice sort of echo of the Gary Page fight. Smack bang in the middle of the main card, during which Joe Rogan, while watching it, said, "This crowd is spoiled. I can't believe they're booing this."
Yeah.
Certainly a thing I say when I'm actively watching a very mediocre fight. Because, like Joe Rogan, I have no ability to distinguish the quality of things that I'm enjoying.
This was the greatest strategic performance of Roman Dolidze's career.
I mean, tell me why.
Deny it.
I mean, yeah
exactly.
Tell me why you say that. I don't fully disagree.
He did low kicks. And then Anthony Smith's primary defense against low kicks is, complaining.
Mm-hmm.
And, telling the other person that they're doing bad things.
Yeah. You're a pussy.
His legs. Yeah,
you're a home invader.
You're robbing my family by kicking me here.
You're a home invader kicking my legs. That's home invader behavior.
He couldn't do that to Roman Dolidze because I think they were friendly.
Oh, I was going to say the language barrier.
That they like each other, and so that left him completely defenseless. So I thought that
what do you do?
Showed a really. Really sharp strategic mindset.
I mean, what do you do if you return home and your house is being actively invaded and it's your buddy Greg?
Yeah.
You can't be mad.
He's just loading stuff up into crates and just taking it out the door and he's...
Come on, Greg. Come on. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really did not expect Dolidze to win this fight. I just thought he was just going to get jabbed.
I didn't expect how much of a strategic genius. Yeah, because how was Anthony Smith going to jab him? He was low kicking him.
I think that was it.
Again, no defensive options available to him.
Again, just to make the context very clear, this is the division that Alex Pereira, new superstar, is king of. This is the land he rules. A fight.
Well, he's now been champion of 2 divisions. Roman Dolidze is now potentially going to be ranked in both those divisions.
Yeah.
That's the kind of cross-divisional quality you can get.
The stars are aligning.
The big man divisions nowadays.
Mm-hmm. I will say, Roman Dolidze, still, in some dimensions, bigger than Anthony Smith. It is insane that he was a middleweight for as long as he was. Mm. He's huge.
Yep.
He also, and this was very troubling to me, he came into this fight looking very handsome. What's up with that? Hmm? He got bangs. It made a huge difference. He had bangs. He's looking like a fucking etching on a Greek coin all of a sudden. Is that all it takes? That's all it takes? You just cover a little bit of forehead?
Yep.
looking like 300 style King Leonidas out there. What's that guy's name? What's that guy's? Gerard Butler, Leonidas.
I almost said Leonidas. That's his name.
You just said it, Connor.
Yeah. So he's got brains and smarts.
Oh my God, that was a comment. That was the commentary I really wanted to bring up. They talked about his fight with Imavov. And they said, the big lesson Roman Dolidze took from that fight is that he said he didn't remember any of it after halfway through the first round. So what he learned is actually was a great deal of confidence that he can just kind of go on autopilot and not have to be worried. I was like, that is a great lesson to take away. That the brain is in fact not necessary.
Yes.
For an
surplus to requirements.
The lesson he took away is that he could basically be like, he could get like electroshock therapy before the fight and just be completely numbed and senseless. Could be lobotomized and still lose a split decision to Nasruddin Imavov. So hey. Light heavyweight.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah. I don't really have a ton to say about the rest of this card. Another, immortal had their chin chested. Charles Jourdain got knocked out by Jean Silva. I'm sure Zayn was absolutely tearing his hair out when that happened, because Jean Silva is one of the fighting nerds.
I mean, they're doing pretty well at the moment.
Yeah. And Zayn do you know this about Zayn? He's just like a massive nerddom gatekeeper. That's what I'm discovering.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's like, you don't get to be a nerd. People want to have sex with you. You're not allowed in the club. He's very protective of being a nerd. I never knew this.
Yeah. Fighting nerds are simply too handsome and ripped.
Yeah. Peyton Talbot had a fight with Giannis Gamori, went 100% as expected, even faster than expected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's about all.
Yeah, we had Andre Feely and Cub Swanson having a cool close fight in the way that you would expect had they fought at pretty much any point in their careers.
Yeah, just a solid, fun fight. I don't have any particularly strong feelings about which way the decision could have gone. I get it.
Martin Uday had what was... I skipped through it. Just... the epitome of like a modern Andrei Arlovsky fight.
Andrei Arlovsky's last UFC fight.
Yeah.
End of an era.
Yes, no longer will he be getting, however many hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, Zayn's best guess was like $400K per fight, which, sweet. That's awesome.
I love the way that they were like, Alex Pereira, you saved this entire card. This was gonna be a Conor McGregor pay-per-view, and you've managed to turn it into something, give us a viral KO that's topped all the social media. You've got loads of people didn't refund their tickets because of you. Here, have less money than we pay Andrei Arlovsky every time he comes out and stinks up the joint.
Yeah. Didn't get a no send-off for former heavyweight champion Andrei Arlovsky. Is it simply because that is so long ago now that no one at the UFC remembers he was heavyweight champ?
No, it's because he said that he isn't retiring.
Oh,
well,
fuck him.
You leave, it's because he's going to be going elsewhere.
You don't get a loving send-off if you intend to betray us by working with our competitors.
Exactly.
Wow.
You need to, essentially, your career needs to die in the UFC to get the video package. So hence, Michelle Waterson, who lost to Gillian Robertson, despite being, obviously a less significant fighter than Andrei Arlovsky, gets a video package because she says that she's retiring. Andrei Arlovsky, who's very much said, no, I will do this forever. I will, even if you fire me. If you're not gonna, pay me money to have my dreadful, dreadful fights, I would simply take them elsewhere. And they were like, well, you're not getting any...
Yeah, we'll get out of here.
Any acknowledgement at all from us. Fuck off.
Yeah, and
take
your crooked nose with you, you piece of shit.
Yep.
This man won the heavyweight championship in 2005.
Yep.
Beginning of 2005, like 19 and a half years ago. And he is still fighting and doing terribly. I mean, the fights are just awful. But
yeah, I mean, you know, remember when we used to say that like an MMA career was like 7 to 9 years? He's been fighting for 24 years.
Yep.
And yeah, all credit to him for
bilking the UFC. He bilked the UFC out of so much money for so many terrible fights, derailing the careers of so many flash in the pan heavyweight pseudo prospects. Yeah, respect to Andrei Arlovsky. Honestly, I barely watched his fight on this card. I barely honored his final UFC bout, but, hey, he deserves everything he got, and he deserves even more.
Yep. So many fighters have injected incredible excitement into the UFC and have been, have received monetary compensation which is in no way proportionate to what they've delivered.
Yeah.
It is somewhat inspiring to have someone who has, for many years, managed to do it in exactly the opposite direction.
Really got all the big money of his career exclusively in the period where he was an anti-fun presence on any card. Yep. Like, that's when the paydays were coming. Keep
well
winning. Keep winning, King.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's...
Or even losing. It doesn't matter. Make the fights as bad as possible.
Just keep getting paid. Really. Okay.
I mean, you know, so many fighters go out from the UFC on a absolutely, you know, on a brutal KO loss.
Yeah.
He didn't.
Nope.
He just left on a fight which sucked ass.
Ian Gary should be so lucky. Getting paid $400,000 for that piece of shit and then getting to leave without getting beaten up in the parking lot by irate fans. That's UFC 303, a strange card. I mean, it was strange from the outset. We thought it looked remarkably good on paper, given all the changes. The card on paper continued to change right up to and through the day of the event. But it did end with Alex Pereira cementing himself as one of the biggest features in the sport, and deservedly so, because you can't ever miss an Alex Pereira fight. And that's it. Next week, of course, is no UFC card, so we will be previewing Rose Namajunas' continued journey through the women's flyweight division. She's actually, I'm quite excited about this one. She's fighting Tracy Cortez, who looked incredible in her last performance. So that's a solid, meaningful, and hopefully exciting main event for a fight night card, which otherwise is, well, out of politeness, I'll say it's still coming together. We'll see what that looks like next week when things are more concrete. But until then, I hope you all enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed at least some of UFC 303. I hope you enjoyed hating on the shitty parts of it as much as I did. And check out my Substack. I'm going to have some little quick breakdown, probably talking about Alex Pereira's knockout over there on facepunching.substack.com. If you want to hear our thoughts on everything that went down on the Whitaker versus Alaskarov card from the week before last, you will find an hour-long bonus episode on the Heavy Hands Patreon, in which we break down basically that entire card, or at least discuss all but I think 2 fights from what I found to be a strangely interesting card. And otherwise, find us on Twitter at Evil Greg Jackson. That's Phil. At Boxing Bush. That's me. We'll talk to you next week. And until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.